Greetings, welcome to SAS Studio. This is the statistical analysis software that we'll be using for this class. So after you log into SAS, click on SAS Studio and it should bring you to a page that looks like this. This is the web-based SAS Studio programming environment, and so now I will tell you a little bit about how to navigate around and some of the functions that it has. First, on this left-hand side, you'll see this rectangle containing server files and folders, tasks and utilities, snippets, and so on. Server files and folders is where we will keep our data. You should have a folder called Files Home. Within that folder, right-click or control-click on it, go to New, and say Folder. Call your folder ClassDat with a capital C and a capital D, and click Save. Well, I already have that folder, so I got an error. When you expand Files Home, you should be able to see your ClassDat folder. This is the folder where you will keep your data to analyze it. You will get your data either from uploading it or from Canvas itself, because I will deposit it in the class folder. So to get to the class folder, what you'll need to do is go to My Courses, or possibly My Shared File Links. I think it might be different on PCs versus Macs. But go to one of those. You should see My Username, which is here. It ends in 79. So there it is. And within that folder, you should be able to find PH205A. Within that folder, you'll find datasets and programming codes in the exams, homework, SAS tutorials, and team project folders. Now, in order to analyze data, you'll have to move it from the class folder into one of your folders, such as the ClassDat folder. So I'd like to show you how to do that right now. So expand the homework folder and you should see this data set called weights. Right-click or control-click on the data set and select Copy To. Then select your ClassDat folder and click Copy. Now you should be able to see the weights data set within your ClassDat folder. You'll see that I have a lot of files listed in my Servers, Files, and Folders menu. You will too by the end of the semester. So I just want to explain what all of these different files are. You can tell what they are by their file extension. The extension for this file is XLSX, which means it's an Excel file that I imported into SAS. The next type of file is .sas7bdat. This is a SAS dataset. Datasets have to be in this format in order for SAS to analyze them. Finally, we have a .sas file. This is a SAS programming file. This is SAS code, and I'll tell you what that means in a minute. Now that you have your weights file in your ClassDat folder, you can start to analyze your data. And the data analysis takes place in two parts. Here, this is our programming window where we write code in the blanks, and the other place is under our tasks and utilities, where there are drop-down menus to help us do some things if we decide we don't want to write code for them. So for example, I could write code to create a bar graph, or I could create one here in the tasks and utilities menus. Let's go back to our server files and folders section and look at our weights data set. Double-click on it to open it up, and here you can actually see the data in the set. You can see these columns and each row. Each observation is in a row. Here you can see all of the different variables that are in the data set. So each column contains a different variables, and these are the column names or variable names. Also, you can change these two column labels, which in this case didn't do anything, but in some data sets you will get a little bit more information about the variables by doing that. The column names are also the variable names, and that's what you need to know to analyze the data. Unfortunately, SAS doesn't know that you want to analyze the weights dataset just because you have it open. Let's actually just click it closed. What you need is a libname statement to tell SAS where the data is. That's the first step in every analysis. So over here in your coding box, you can start by writing libname. Next, you'll type the name of the folder that contains the data set you want to analyze. So weights here we know is in our ClassDat folder. So libname ClassDat, and now you need to identify that ClassDat folder as your own. And the way you do that is by right-clicking on that ClassDat folder and scroll down to Properties. Here you can see the location. This is your personal address. So select that, copy it, click Close, and then paste it right here. Next, put quotations. They can be single or double. And finally, the way we end every SAS programming line is with a semicolon. Now, we're going to have to use this libname statement every time we want to analyze any data that's in the ClassDat folder. So let's save it so we don't have to type it every time. And the way we do that is highlight it, right-click, and then click Add to My Snippets. You can name your snippet, maybe ClassDat libname statement, and you can press save. Now if you go to My Snippets, you'll see that it's there. That's the snippet I just saved. So in the future, if I just have a blank programming window and I want to analyze some data from my ClassDat folder, I come over here, I double click on it, voila, there it is. I don't have to type. Okay, after you've got your libname down, you'll need to run it by highlighting it and then clicking on the little running person. And you should get a message that doesn't have any errors. So the programming window is broken up into code, that's where we write, log, that tells us if there are any errors in our code, and results. And so this would be the tables and results of statistical tests that we run. So again, every time we want to analyze data that's in our ClassDat folder, we need to start by running this libname statement. Now there are two types of commands in SAS. There are commands that are procedural. They will start with proc. There are also commands that have to do with manipulating the data, and they start with data. Now, if we'd like to analyze data from the weights data set, let's take a look at its contents with a proc contents statement. Now again, SAS always wants you to tell it exactly what data you're using. So it's going to be proc contents data equals, and it's actually suggested for me here, yeah, ClassDat. So that's the name of the folder where the data set is kept, and then the name of the data set itself. So I have a lot of data sets here. You should be able to see it right away though. So ClassDat.weights. The number one mistake people make in SAS is forgetting a semicolon. So always remember to add that at the end of every line you type. Now in SAS, it doesn't really matter where you type. The order, of course, matters, but if I wanted to put some space between my proc content statement and the next line of my code, I could do that, no problem. Spacing within lines also doesn't matter. So if I wanted to put a space between the S and the semicolon, that's okay. I can put a space on either side of the equal sign or not. SAS doesn't care. What's kind of neat in SAS is it does allow you to insert some text into these lines of code that doesn't actually run as code, that you can just use to describe what you're doing. So for example, in the future, if I wanted to remind myself what I'm doing here, I could put a little bit of descriptive text. And that always starts with a star, and it's always green. Green means it's yours. SAS doesn't care what it is. You can write whatever you want. It starts with a star and it ends with a semicolon. So I might say I'm looking at contents of dataset. I end it with a semicolon. As long as that line stays green, SAS ignores it as code. It's just for you. So now we can go ahead and run this proc content statement to see what is in that weights dataset. The way we do it is by highlighting it and then clicking the running person. And here's our results. Now, if we scroll down, we can see things about our data set, including all of the variables that it contains. To get back to our coding window, to write some more code, we just click the code tab here on the top. If we'd like to save this program that we've written, we can do so by clicking on the little disk with the pencil. And now we can name it whatever we want to, and we can choose a folder to save it in. So for example, you may want to save it in your ClassDat folder and click save. And then in the future, you can go to your ClassDat folder and you should be able to find that program that you saved, and it'll have the extension .sas. Now I just want to explain a few more things about how to use and navigate SAS. Sometimes you won't see this server files and folder window at all. It will just go away. If that happens, no problem. go up here, click View, and click Server, Files, and Folders. View, Server, Files, and Folders until you see it again. If you don't see a programming window or you'd like to open a new programming window, you can have multiple programs open at the same time. You click this icon and say SAS Program, and now we have another program. Another tip that might be helpful if you have a small screen is this button here, which will expand whatever screen you're working on. And that's all for this tutorial. Thanks, everybody.